the mayor, the council president, and the Dr. Fine made a request yesterday to have access to the detainees to evaluate their health, safety, and welfare. They were informed by the warden via letter this morning that in fact they would be allowed to come in today at 4 p.m. I'm gonna have a copy of the letter here. And in the letter, the warden says that he was informed by the ICE field office that direct access to the detainees by outside third parties is prohibited and is standard policy at all facilities. Notwithstanding that, the warden then continued to say he would be happy to give them a tour of the facility and the housing units where the ICE detainees are housed. You will have full access to the housing unit to observe the living conditions of the detainees, to look inside the cells and showers, and to take a general tour of the facility. Importantly, he concludes by saying, we'll see you at 4 p.m. if there are additional individuals who will be taking the tour with you. Could you also provide me with their names so I can alert the front desk? So the chief of staff did alert the warden via email the additional names, which included a doctor, an attorney, a reporter, a community advocate, and at around 40 minutes before 4 o'clock, the attorney for the Wyatt called and said, we are going to, notwithstanding the warden agreeing to allow additional folks, we are going to restrict access to the original 3. And then we arrived here and asked again for the group to have access. And we went in that room and they stated their point again, which was that they trust, have vetted, and believe the mayor, the council president, and Dr. Fine have previously visited the facility, and they are fine giving them the tour still. But then any additional folks have not been vetted, approved, background checks, etc., would not be allowed. So I stated the point that Attorney Gonzales here has visited detainees and clients here previously, so she has been vetted, approved, and allowed access. Dr. Rich has been in this facility before and has been an expert. He works at the ACI, has visited federal prisons, and so he's also been vetted and approved. They said we are not going to go one by one and approve or deny. We are simply denying everybody but the original 3.
And that wasn't Matthew Lopes that said that? Attorney Lopes?
That's correct.
So when you went into that room, Lopes actually initially only invited the mayor, and then when the mayor asked what's going on, he said, "You want the tour, don't you?" So was there an attempt to make it so that only Mayor Diosa was going through?
I didn't hear that, so I don't know what that meant.
So do you think that Wyatt Detention Facility is being completely open with what is happening here right now?
I think the warden had the right instinct to allow folks in to see the facility. And I think the warden has always been open and transparent, and Attorney Gonzales asked for the process to bring additional lawyers here to have trainings and increase access to legal services for detainees, and the warden gave her and gave us a process for doing that, and assured us he would give us contact information for the ICE field office in Boston, and we're going to follow the process that he gave us.
So what does that process look like?
Submitting an official request, he forwards it to Boston. Boston gives him an answer. He gives the response back to us.
And if ICE decides not to allow you through, what happens then?
Well, I think ICE's issue is really a direct contact issue, right? So the warden, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there were 2 separate tracks we're talking about here. One is a tour, right? People having access to the facility just to see where the inmates are being housed, what their, conditions are. And then this separate track, which is the one I have an interest in through the Rhode Island Coalition, is can we get access to the facility to do Know Your Rights trainings? Can we do trainings of credible fear and reasonable fear interviews that are going to be conducted? Can we get religious clergy in here? Can we get mental health workers, social workers, to be able to provide really a holistic service menu, if you will, through the coalition, and the answer that we got was a letter needs to go to the warden, and then the warden will forward it to ICE, and then ICE will let the warden know whether or not the folks can have direct contact. I'm hoping that the letter that goes to ICE will really clear the organization, right, the Rhode Island Coalition, much like they would clear PAIR, to come and do a Know Your Rights presentation, right? I want the Rhode Island Coalition to be cleared so that if we want to do a Know Your Rights presentation here, I don't have to send a letter every single time saying, Natalie Lerner is coming and she's going to do a Know Your Rights. Can I get authorization to get Natalie in because she's not a lawyer?
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll work on that, and through Matt Jurcik and the mayor's office, I think in tandem, all of us together will make sure that we're getting access to the detainees that are here.
Is there any sense of disappointment on your part for not being allowed in?
I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed because I was excited to have the ability to go tour the inside of the facility, but I'm not surprised by it at all. I go to various detention facilities alone. I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a law professor, and when I go alone, no problem. I get into the facility in an instant. Nobody asks me a question. I provide my bar card. I provide my identification. I tell them who I'm there to see. I'm allowed in. I can stay in for as long as I need to. And then they let me out, and it's never a problem. When I bring law students, it's a problem. I have to send identification. I have to send, dates of birth and social security numbers and all sorts of things for me to get clearance. But I know that that's the case, so I'm not surprised.
What kind of questions were you hoping to ask in the tour? Do you have any idea, any ideas what you're thinking of? Or
in terms of what I would be asking, I want to know if anybody's already doing Know Your Rights here. I want to know why the inmates are here. Are they here for criminal charges and are now being detained on a mandatory detainer? I want to know, are they being really brought through the border, which is how we understand this to be happening, right? That this is through the southern border policy because there are no beds at the southern border, and that's why folks are being housed here. Well, I want to know, is there legal representation that these folks have access to so that they can at least prepare for these interviews that are coming? Because here they are, and God only knows, I have no idea whether or not these detainees are being detained because they're coming from Texas and maybe they had family in Texas and they had hoped to stay in Texas so that the family could have helped them get a lawyer, and now they're being sent to Rhode Island, where is, across the country, and now they may not have access to a lawyer, even a family member who can find a lawyer in the state of Rhode Island, right? So the Immigrant Coalition of Rhode Island is really trying to get lawyers in here to do Know Your Rights presentations so that these folks know what their rights are, to prepare them for their credible fear and or reasonable fear interviews. I don't believe, and in fact, I pulled off of the Department of Justice's website the list of pro bono services. Every pro bono service organization is in Massachusetts or New Hampshire.
Right.
Those folks are not going to come to Rhode Island to do an intake on a client who's sitting in Wyatt in Rhode Island, which is why the Immigrant Coalition really needs to get into this facility to help these folks prepare for these interviews that are coming up.
And how about you, Natalie?
I think I would mostly agree with what Debbie was saying. The fact that we don't even know yet where people have come from, I think that's we can't contact their consulates because we don't know what country they're from. And I think that, to me, feels like a big issue. I would agree, just from the perspective of I think really trying to support the people inside, in addition with community services, if folks need pastoral care, mental health services, sort of whatever we can be coordinating for them beyond legal services as well, I think is our priority for sure.
Thank you.
Now, from your perspective, what are the rights of detainees in immigrant cases?
They don't have right to a lawyer for free, right? Lawyers in immigration context are not free, but they do have the right to have a lawyer, and they do have the right to have a lawyer come in and prepare them for their interview, and they do have a right to know what their burden is. 9 times out of 10, these people show up at the border and they say, I'm afraid. Okay, so why are you afraid? Well, whatever. I'm afraid because my husband beats me. I'm afraid because, you know, I'm living in poverty. I'm afraid because of the gang violence. I'm afraid because the government is persecuting me because I'm gay or whatever the case may be. But these folks have no idea what their burden is. They don't know what it is that they need to prove or what documents they need to submit. And in many instances, they don't have access to the documents, or they're illiterate. They don't even, the warden did tell us that there's a library and, you know, there are other facilities that the inmates have access to, but, you know, I don't know that these folks even know how to turn on a computer. I mean, I don't know who the population is, so it's hard for me to answer.
And Dr. Ritz, you were originally supposed to go on the tour as well. What were you interested in looking at?
Well, I've been to correctional facilities on 4 different continents, and I was just asked by the mayor to come along with this tour and look at conditions of confinement and health care and any health issues, and happy to do that.
So what, do you have any plans to attempt to get in the future?
You know, the mayor's, if I can be helpful, I'm happy to be helpful. You know, I've been here before. I've met with the healthcare team, and I've been impressed with the quality of some of the providers here. So I think, you know, I believe this is a professionally run facility, but no substitution for actually seeing it.